In a quiet, unassuming town, where the hum of old engines fills the air and life is measured in long days and small victories, Michael Turner, a widowed mechanic and devoted father, is doing everything he can to keep his world intact. For Michael, each day is a delicate balancing act of fixing cars, paying bills, and raising his 7-year-old daughter, Emily, with love and hope in a world that often feels overwhelming. But one cold winter morning, fate intervenes in the form of a luxury sports car stranded on the roadside. Behind the wheel is Susan, a poised and striking woman with secrets of her own. Their paths cross in what seems like a fleeting moment of kindness, but little does Michael know, this encounter will change the course of his life forever. What begins as a simple act of generosity unravels into a journey of second chances, unexpected opportunities, and the discovery that the greatest riches in life aren't always found in a bank account. As Michael and Susan's lives intertwine, the line between chance and destiny blurs, leaving one question lingering: can a single moment truly transform everything? If you've ever believed in the power of kindness or wondered how the smallest actions can ripple into extraordinary outcomes, this is a story you won't want to miss. Join us as we delve into a tale filled with heart, hope, and a touch of mystery that will leave you reflecting long after the last word. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell to follow Michael and Susan's journey. Their story might just change the way you see your own. Now let's begin. And so on that icy morning, as Michael tightened the last bolt under the hood of a stranger's car, he couldn't have imagined that his simple act of kindness was the start of something far greater. A struggling single dad helped a woman fix her car. She turned out to be a billionaire. The morning air was sharp and cold, biting at Michael's cheeks as he hustled Emily, his 7-year-old daughter, into their aging sedan. Winter in their small Midwestern town had settled in with a vengeance, and the frost-covered roads gleamed dangerously under the pale sunlight. Michael's mind raced, a mix of anxiety about his low-paying mechanic job and Emily's school schedule, as he pulled out of their modest driveway. "Did you pack everything for today, Emily? Homework, lunch, gloves?" he asked, glancing in the rearview mirror. "Yes, Dad," Emily chirped, her little voice slightly muffled by her oversized scarf. But as they neared the school, Emily gasped. "Oh no, I left my lunchbox on the kitchen." "A counter," Michael sighed, gripping the steering wheel tighter. Time was already slipping away. "We'll have to turn back," he muttered. Though frustrated, he couldn't bring himself to scold her. She was just a kid. Turning the car around, Michael's concerns deepened when the gas gauge hovered perilously close to E. Money was tight, and he had been stretching every dollar to cover groceries and bills. "We'll make it," he whispered to himself, as much a prayer as a reassurance. As they made their way back to school, Michael noticed a sleek white sports car pulled over on the shoulder of the road. The vehicle's hazard lights blinked rhythmically, cutting through the morning fog. Beside it stood a young woman, perhaps in her late 20s, bundled in a stylish but clearly inadequate coat for the biting cold. She was pacing, phone pressed to her ear, her expression a mixture of frustration and resignation. Emily, ever curious, leaned forward. "Dad, that car looks so cool, but why's the lady standing outside in the cold?" Michael hesitated. He was running late and his tank was nearly empty, but the sight of her, helpless on the side of the road, gnawed at his conscience. He'd pulled over. "Stay in the car, Emily," he said, stepping out into the icy air. His boots crunched against the frosted asphalt as he approached her. "Need some help?" The woman, startled, turned toward him. She was striking, with dark hair swept into a ponytail and eyes that held a quiet intensity. Despite her elegant appearance, there was a warmth in her expression that made her approachable. "Oh, thank you," she said, her voice tinged with relief. "My car just stopped. I've been trying to call roadside assistance, but they said it'll be at least an hour." Michael nodded. taking a quick glance at the vehicle. "Mind if I take a look?" "Please," she replied, stepping aside. Michael popped the hood and leaned in, his practiced hands moving deftly through the car's sophisticated engine. Meanwhile, Emily rolled down her window, waving at the woman. "Hi, I'm Emily," she called out brightly. The woman smiled and walked over to her. "Hi, Emily, I'm Susan. Is that your dad?" "Yep," Emily said proudly. "He's the best at fixing cars. He fixes ours all the time because it's kinda old." Susan chuckled. "Sounds like your dad's a real hero." Emily nodded vigorously. "He works so hard for me. He always says we'll be okay as long as we stick together." Susan's smile softened. "You're lucky to have him." After a few more minutes, Michael closed the hood and wiped his hands on his worn jeans. "It was a loose connector to your ignition system. Should be good now. Try starting it." Susan slid into the driver's seat and turned the key. The engine roared to life. She looked up at Michael, her expression a mix of gratitude and admiration. "You're a lifesaver. I don't know how to thank you." Michael waved her off. "No, just glad I could help." But Susan wasn't convinced. "At least let me pay you for your time," she insisted, reaching into her bag. Michael held up his hands. "Really, it's fine. Just part of being a decent human." Susan hesitated, then smiled. "At least let me get your number. If you ever need anything, I'd like to return the favor." Michael shrugged, giving her his phone number more out of politeness than expectation. As Susan drove away, Michael returned to his car, where Emily was grinning. "Dad, who was that?" she asked, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. "Just someone who needed a little help," Michael replied, though something about the encounter lingered in his mind. Emily tilted her head. "I think she's special, don't you think so?" Michael chuckled, tousling her hair. "Maybe. Now let's get you to school before we're even later." As they drove off, Michael couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror, watching the sleek car fade into the distance. There was something about Susan, her demeanor, her gratitude, that he couldn't quite shake. But he dismissed he thought, focusing instead on the next challenge, making it to work on time with a near-empty gas tank. Little did he know, their paths would cross again, and this ordinary act of kindness would set in motion a series of extraordinary events that would forever change his and Emily's lives. The day began like any other for Michael. The bell over the door of his repair shop jingled as a customer stepped in, interrupting the rhythmic clinking of tools in the small, run-down space. His shop was a far cry from the state-of-the-art garages he'd once dreamed of owning. The tools were second-hand, the floor was perpetually stained with oil, and the heater worked only sporadically. Hardly enough to keep the winter chill at bay. But it was work, and for Michael, work meant keeping. Emily fed, clothed, and safe. That was enough for him. It had been a few days since he'd helped the woman with the white sports car, and though the encounter lingered in his thoughts, he'd filed it away as just another moment in his day. So, when the doorbell chimed mid-morning, and he looked up to see Susan standing in the doorway, he was genuinely surprised. She was a stark contrast to the grease-streaked environment around her. Her sleek coat, polished boots, and an effortless confidence made her seem out of place, yet she carried herself with an ease that softened the disparity. In her hands was a small wicker basket wrapped in cellophane, tied with a bright red bow. "Michael, right?" she said, her voice warm. He straightened from the car he'd been working on, wiping his hands on a rag. "Susan," he replied, a bit cautious. "Didn't expect to see you here," she smiled. "I was in the area and thought I'd drop this off to thank you for your help the other day." She held out the basket, which he took reluctantly. Inside were baked goods, cookies, muffins, and a small jar of homemade jam. "You didn't have to do this," he said, though a part of him was touched. "Maybe not," she replied, her smile widening, "but I wanted to." As Michael set the basket down on the counter, Susan's eyes wandered around the shop. She took in the chipped paint on the walls, the ancient equipment, and the patchwork repairs on the workbench. Yet amid the disrepair, she noticed something else. The meticulous way Michael worked, the careful arrangement of tools, and the way he greeted every customer with genuine warmth. "It's a cozy place," she said diplomatically. Michael chuckled. "That's one way to put it." He picked up a wrench and returned to the engine he'd been working on. "It's not much, but it keeps the lights on. Well, most of the time." Susan leaned against the counter, watching him work. "How long?" "Have you been running this place?" "5 years, he replied without looking up. "Bought it when things were better. Thought I'd build it up, make something out of it. But you know, life happens." "What happened?" she asked, her tone soft. Michael paused, his hands resting on the edge of the car's hood. He rarely talked about his struggles to anyone, outside of Emily, but there was something about Susan's presence, calm, genuine, that made him feel at ease. "My wife passed away," he said finally. "Car accident. Emily was just a toddler then. After that, it was all about her. I gave up on the big dreams, owning a fancy garage, expanding, because keeping her safe and happy became the only thing that mattered." Susan nodded, her expression unreadable. "That's a lot for one person to carry," he shrugged. "You do what you have to." While they talked, a customer walked in, a middle-aged man with a nervous energy. "Hey, Michael," he said, ringing his hands. "The car's making that rattling noise again." "All right, Dave," Michael said, setting aside his wrench. "Let's take a look." Susan watched as Michael guided the man outside and began diagnosing the problem with a patient, straightforward manner. At one point, Michael showed Dave how to tighten a loose belt himself, explaining it in a way that was clear and empowering rather than condescending. When Michael returned, Susan was smiling. "You don't just fix cars, you take care of people, too." Michael shrugged, suddenly self-conscious under her gaze. "I guess, just seems like the right thing to do." Susan tilted her head, studying him. "Have you ever thought about doing more with this place? Expanding, upgrading?" Michael laughed lightly, shaking his head. "Sure, back when I first started. But dreams don't pay the bills, and they definitely don't raise kids." "What if you had the chance to make it happen?" she asked, her voice careful, almost testing. He looked at her, frowning slightly. "What do you mean?" Susan hesitated, as if weighing her next words. "I just think someone like you, hard-working, good at what you do, deserves a shot at something bigger. If an opportunity came along, would you take it?" Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. "What kind of opportunity?" Susan smiled mysteriously. "That depends." She straightened and glanced at the clock on the wall. "I should let you get back to work. Thanks for letting me drop by." "You're welcome," Michael said, though her words left a strange weight in the air. As Susan walked out, Emily bounded into the shop from the small office in the back where she'd been coloring. She peeked out the window, watching Susan get into her car. "Dad, is that the same lady from the other day?" "Yep," Michael replied, still staring at the door she had just exited. Emily's eyes sparkled. "She seems really nice. Do you think we'll see her again?" Michael shrugged, but a faint smile tugged at his lips. "Maybe, you never know." As Emily returned to her coloring, Michael found himself replaying Susan's parting words in his mind. "If an opportunity came along, would you take it?" He didn't know what she meant, but something about the way she said it made him wonder if this wasn't the last time he'd see her. The buzz of Michael's phone startled him as he was cleaning up after dinner. Emily was sitting at the kitchen table, carefully coloring in a book with her favorite set of crayons. Michael glanced at the caller ID, a number he didn't recognize. Normally he wouldn't answer, but something told him this wasn't just a spam call. "Hello?" he answered hesitantly, holding the phone between his shoulder and ear as he wiped the counter. "Mr. Michael Turner?" A woman's polished voice came through. "Yes, this is Michael," he replied, frowning slightly. "This is Claire Bennett, the hiring coordinator for Orion Motors." I'm reaching out on behalf of our CEO, Susan Wright, who mentioned you specifically. We'd like to invite you for an interview for a managerial role in our technical division." Michael froze, the rag in his hand forgotten. I think there's been a mistake," he stammered. "I'm just a small-town mechanic. I'm not qualified for something like that." Claire's tone remained professional but warm. "Mr. Turner, I assure you this isn't a mistake. Ms. Wright is quite familiar with your work and believes you'd be an excellent candidate. If you're available, we'd love to meet with you on Wednesday at 10 a.m. Michael hesitated, his mind racing. Susan Wright, the woman with the sports car, the basket of baked goods. Her words echoed in his mind. "If you had the chance to change your life, would you take it?" Okay, he finally said, unsure of what else to do. "Excellent. I'll send the details to your email," Claire said. "We look forward to seeing you, Mr. Turner." As the call ended, Michael set the phone down and leaned against the counter, his thoughts swirling. "Who was that, Dad?" Emily asked, looking up from her coloring book. Michael hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Just someone offering me a strange opportunity." The next morning, Michael woke up with a knot in his stomach. He spent most of the day second-guessing himself. Was this some kind of elaborate joke? Why would someone like Susan, a CEO, single him out? Yet, as much as he doubted, he couldn't deny the tiny flicker of curiosity and hope that kept pushing him forward. By the time Wednesday morning arrived, Michael stood in front of his closet, staring at the few clean shirts he owned. None of them screamed professional, but he picked the one that seemed least worn. As he adjusted his collar in the mirror, Emily appeared in the doorway, her hair still messy from sleep. "Where are you going, Dad?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. Michael crouched down to her level. "I have a meeting today, Em. Something important." "Is it for work?" "Maybe," he said with a small smile. "It could be something big." Emily's face lit up. "Are they going to pay you more so we can get better snacks?" Michael laughed, ruffling her hair. "Maybe. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, okay?" The Orion Motors headquarters was a towering glass building that gleamed under the late morning sun. Michael felt entirely out of place as he walked through the sleek lobby, his boots squeaking slightly against the polished floor. Men and women in tailored suits passed him by, barely sparing a glance. He checked in at the reception desk and was directed to a private elevator. As the doors opened on the top floor, Michael stepped out into a spacious office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. His nervousness grew with every step. "Mr. Turner," a familiar voice greeted him warmly. Michael turned to see Susan walking toward him, her hand outstretched. She was dressed impeccably, her confidence almost tangible, but her smile was friendly and disarming. "Susan," he said, shaking her hand, "I didn't expect to see you here." "Well, I did say I work in the automotive industry," she replied with a small laugh. "Come on, let's talk." Susan led him into a private conference room where a spread of documents and diagrams lay neatly arranged. She gestured for him to sit, and he did so hesitantly, still feeling out of place. "Michael," she began, her tone serious but kind, "I know this might seem sudden or even strange, but after meeting you and seeing how you work, I felt compelled to offer you something more." He frowned. "I'm just a mechanic. What could I possibly bring to a company like this?" Susan leaned forward slightly, her eyes focused on his. "You're not just a mechanic. You're resourceful, hardworking, and you care about the people you help. That's a rare combination, and it's exactly what we need here." Michael looked down at his hands, still calloused from years of labor. "I don't have a fancy degree or a corporate background. I'd be out of my depth." Susan shook her head. "What you don't realize is that your experience is worth just as much, if not more. This isn't about where you've been, Michael. It's about where you could go. All I'm asking is that you consider it." The interview concluded with, Susan explaining the role and the potential it held. Michael left the building feeling both overwhelmed and intrigued. As he drove home, his mind was a whirlwind of doubt, excitement, and fear. That evening, Emily bounded into the living room, her energy undeterred by the cold weather outside. "How did it go, Dad? Did they say yes? Are you going to take it?" Michael hesitated, looking into his daughter's eager eyes. "I'm not sure, Em. It's a big change. I don't know if I'm ready for it." Emily frowned, then smiled brightly. "But you always tell me to try new things, even if they're scary." Michael chuckled. "You're right, I do say that. Then you have to try, Dad," she declared, her confidence unwavering. Michael pulled her into a hug, her enthusiasm infectious. "All right," he murmured, "I'll try." That night, as he lay in bed, Michael stared at the ceiling, thinking about the road ahead. The decision to accept Susan's offer felt like stepping into a world he didn't belong in, but Emily's words echoed in his mind. You have to try. For her, for their future, he would take the leap. Michael stepped into the sleek, glass-lined offices of Orion Motors on his first day, feeling both excited and overwhelmed. The hum of productivity filled the air as well-dressed professionals moved briskly through the hallways, their polished shoes clicking against the marble floors. Michael, in his scuffed work boots and slightly wrinkled shirt, couldn't help but feel like an outsider. The onboarding process was efficient but impersonal. He sat through a series of presentations about company policies, workplace culture, and expectations for managers. The corporate jargon swirled in his head, leaving him disoriented. He had fixed engines, solved mechanical puzzles, and worked tirelessly under the hood of cars. But this world of spreadsheets, conference calls, and strategic initiatives felt foreign and daunting. By lunchtime, Michael was introduced to his new team. Most of them greeted him politely, though he couldn't shake the feeling that their smiles were laced with curiosity or skepticism. One person, however, made his disdain known almost immediately. "Michael Turner, right?" said Tom, a sharp-dressed man in his early 40s with a smug smile. "The new technical manager Susan brought in." "That's me," Michael said, extending a hand. Tom glanced at it briefly before folding his arms. "Interesting choice. You come from, what was it, a small-town garage?" Michael felt the heat rise to his face. "That's right," he replied evenly. "Ran my own shop for a few years." Tom smirked. "Well, this isn't exactly carburetors. And fan belts. Hope you can keep up." The words stung, but Michael kept his composure. "Guess we'll find out," he said, his tone calm but firm. Tom chuckled softly as he walked away, leaving Michael with a knot of frustration in his chest. The rest of the day didn't go much better. During a team meeting, Michael struggled to follow the fast-paced discussion filled with technical jargon and industry buzzwords. He jotted down notes furiously, determined to catch up, but he couldn't shake the feeling that he was falling behind. When the meeting ended, Tom leaned over and whispered, "It's a lot to take in, huh? Don't worry, rookie, you'll get." There, eventually, Michael gritted his teeth, holding back a retort. He left the office that evening feeling drained, questioning his decision to take this job. At home, Emily greeted him with her usual enthusiasm. "Hi, Dad. Did you fix any cool cars today?" Michael managed a small smile as he hung up his coat. "Not exactly, kiddo. Today was different." Emily tilted her head, her brow furrowing. "Different how?" Michael sat down heavily at the kitchen table, running a hand through his hair. "Just a lot to learn. A lot of people who've been doing this a lot longer than me." Emily climbed onto the chair beside him, her small hands resting on his arm. "But you're really smart, Dad. And you're the best at fixing things." Michael chuckled softly. "Fixing things with wrenches, sure. Fixing things with spreadsheets, not so much." Emily frowned, clearly not understanding, but sensing her dad's frustration. She hopped off her chair and disappeared into her room without a word. Michael sighed, leaning back in his chair. He stared at the ceiling, replaying the day in his mind. Every awkward moment, every misstep, every condescending glance from Tom, it all weighed heavily on him. The next morning, as Michael got ready for work, Emily handed him a folded piece of paper. "What's this?" he asked, taking it from her small hands. "It's for you," she said, her face serious. "Open it when you get to work." Michael kissed her forehead. "All right, kiddo. Thanks." Later that day, during a particularly discouraging moment at his desk, Michael remembered the note. He unfolded it and read the uneven, crayon-scrawled words. "You're not just the best dad, you're the best fixer ever. Love, Emily." Next to the words was a crude drawing of a smiling stick figure labeled Dad, holding a wrench, with a car on one side and a heart on the other. Michael felt a lump rise in his throat. He stared at the note for a long moment, a small, genuine smile breaking across his face. He folded the paper carefully and tucked it into his wallet. That evening, he stayed late at the office, poring over technical manuals and company documents. For every word he didn't understand, he made a note to look it up later. For every process he felt unsure about, he sketched out diagrams and questions. Tom passed by his desk at one point, raising an eyebrow. "Burning the midnight oil already?" Michael looked up, meeting Tom's gaze steadily. "Just catching up," Tom shrugged. "Suit yourself." But Michael didn't care about Tom's opinions anymore. He wasn't doing this for Tom or even for Susan. He was doing it for Emily, for the little girl who believed in him even when he doubted himself. By the time Michael left the office that night, he felt a renewed sense of determination. He still didn't know how he would prove himself in this new world, but he knew one thing for certain: he wouldn't give up. As he drove home, he thought of Emily's note, safely tucked in his wallet, and smiled. "I can do this," he said softly to himself. The sound of Emily's laughter echoed across the grassy field as she chased a butterfly with reckless abandon. The park was alive with the scents of freshly cut grass and blooming flowers, the kind of serene place that made life's burdens feel a little lighter. Michael watched her with a soft smile, his hands absently arranging the contents of the picnic basket on the checkered blanket beneath him. It was Susan's idea to meet here. She had suggested a weekend outing after noticing the growing weight of Michael's responsibilities. "You deserve a break," she had said, "and Emily does too." Susan arrived shortly after, carrying a thermos of coffee and a bag filled with baked treats. Dressed casually in a light sweater and jeans, she seemed more approachable than ever, blending seamlessly into the relaxed atmosphere. "Hope I'm not late," she said, setting her things down beside Michael. "Not at all," he replied, standing to help her. "Emily's been chasing butterflies since we got here. I think she's convinced one will let her catch it." Susan laughed, her eyes following Emily's excited movements. "She's got a lot of energy." "That's putting it mildly," Michael said with a chuckle, sitting back down. They settled in, sharing stories and sipping coffee while Emily explored the nearby trees. For the first time in weeks, Michael felt the tension in his shoulders ease. As they enjoyed the picnic, Emily eventually returned, her cheeks flushed from running. She plopped down between them, grabbing a cookie from Susan's bag with a wide grin. "These are really good," she exclaimed, her mouth half full. Susan smiled. "Glad you like them. My grandma used to make these when I was your age. I thought I'd try her recipe again." "You had a grandma who baked for you?" Emily asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. "What about your mom and dad? Did they bake too?" The question seemed innocent enough, but Susan hesitated, her smile faltering ever so slightly. Michael noticed and gently placed a hand on Emily's shoulder. "Maybe let Susan finish her cookie first, kiddo." But Susan waved him off. "It's okay," she said softly. She turned to Emily, her expression thoughtful. "My parents, they didn't bake. They were very busy with work when I was growing up. Important jobs, lots of meetings. I spent a lot of time with nannies or at boarding school. Emily frowned. That doesn't sound very fun. Susan laughed lightly, though her eyes glistened. It wasn't, but it taught me to be independent. And it made me appreciate people like you and your dad, who always make time for each other. Michael's chest tightened at her words. For all her success and confidence, Susan carried her own quiet pain. They shifted to lighter topics, with Emily enthusiastically sharing her latest school projects. We're making a volcano next week. Dad said he'd help me, but I think I can do most of it myself. Michael laughed. That's news to me. I thought I was doing the messy part. Susan chimed in. If you need help with the design, I've got some experience with big projects. Really? Emily asked, her eyes sparkling. Sure, Susan said, though my projects usually don't involve lava. The three of them laughed, the conversation flowing easily. It was as if, for a few hours, they had formed their own little world, where stress and challenges didn't exist. As the sun began to dip lower in the sky, painting the park in hues of gold and orange, they started packing up the picnic. Emily, holding onto Susan's hand as they walked toward the car, suddenly said, I like it when we're all together. It feels like a family. Michael froze momentarily, glancing at Susan, who looked equally caught off guard. Her eyes met his, and for a fleeting moment there was an unspoken understanding between them. Well, Susan said, her voice soft, but steady. It's nice spending time with both of you. You're very special people, Emily. Emily beamed, oblivious to the emotional weight of her words. Michael, however, felt a knot form in his throat. He wasn't sure what it meant, this connection they were building. But it felt important, even if he didn't have the words for it yet. The drive home was quiet, Emily dozing in the back seat as Michael replayed the day in his mind. He thought of Susan's vulnerability when she talked about her childhood, her easy laughter with Emily, and the way she had looked at him when Emily mentioned family. Michael glanced at the rearview mirror, where Emily's peaceful face reflected back at him. Whatever this was with Susan, he wasn't sure where it was headed, but he knew one thing: it was something worth holding on to. The tension in the air was palpable as Michael entered the office that morning. Though he had started to find his footing, the sense of being under a microscope hadn't faded. He could feel the glances, some curious, others skeptical, from his colleagues as he passed through the halls. He tried to brush it off, focusing instead on the stack of technical reports waiting for him on his desk. But no matter how much he tried to ignore it, Michael knew there was something simmering beneath the surface. By midday, the murmurs of discontent reached him directly. During a team meeting to discuss a new product line, Tom, the same colleague who had doubted him from day one, made his feelings known. As much as I appreciate fresh perspectives, Tom began, leaning back in his chair with an air of smugness, I have to question the decision to place someone with unconventional qualifications in such a pivotal role. The room fell silent, all eyes darting between Tom and Michael. Michael felt his chest tighten, but before he could respond, Susan, seated at the head of the table, spoke up. Tom, she said, her tone calm but firm, we're here to discuss the product, not personal qualifications. Let's stay on topic. Tom raised his hands in mock surrender. Of course, just an observation. The meeting continued, but the damage was done. Michael kept his head down, but the knot in his stomach grew tighter. Later that day, Michael overheard a conversation in the break room. I just don't get it, one voice said. There are dozens of qualified candidates out there, and she picks a mechanic? Right? I mean, what's he bringing to the table? Another chimed in. Michael quietly backed away, his appetite for the sandwich in his hand disappearing. That evening, as he sat at his desk trying to focus on the work in front of him, Susan appeared at his door. Got a minute? She asked, leaning casually against the frame. Michael nodded, motioning for her to sit. I wanted to check in, she said, her eyes scanning his face. You've been awfully quiet today. Michael hesitated, unsure whether to share what he'd heard, but Susan's expression was open and sincere. so he took a deep breath. "I know people are questioning why I'm here," he admitted. "And, honestly, I'm starting to wonder the same thing. I don't have the degrees or the corporate background. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm not cut out for this." Susan sat back, crossing her arms thoughtfully. "Michael, do you know why I hired you?" He shrugged, unsure how to respond. "It wasn't because of your resume," she said. "It was because of who you are. I saw someone who thinks on their feet, solves problems, and genuinely cares about the work they do. That's not something you can teach in a classroom. That's something you've earned through experience." Michael looked down, her words sinking in but failing to erase his doubts. "I appreciate that, but it feels like I'm making things harder for you. I don't want to be the reason you're facing pushback." Susan leaned forward, her voice steady. "If I let other people's doubts dictate my decisions, I wouldn't be where I am today, and neither would you. Don't let them get in your head, Michael. You belong here." The following day, Michael's doubts were put to the test. Susan had called a meeting with the board to discuss a key project, and as Michael entered the sleek conference room, he felt the weight of a dozen pairs of eyes on him. One of the board members, a stern-faced woman named Margaret, wasted no time addressing the elephant in the room. "Susan, we've received some concerns regarding Mr. Turner's appointment. While I respect your authority as CEO, I think we deserve an explanation as to why someone with no formal qualifications was chosen for such a critical role." Michael's throat went dry. He glanced at Susan, half expecting her to falter under the scrutiny, but she didn't. "Margaret," Susan began, her tone measured, "I understand the concerns, but let me be clear. Michael was chosen because he brings something this company needs: practical expertise and a fresh perspective. He has solved problems in ways that others haven't even considered, and in an industry that thrives on innovation, that kind of thinking is invaluable." Margaret raised an eyebrow. "Innovation is important, yes, but experience and credentials matter too." "And Michael has experience," Susan countered. "Just because it doesn't come from a traditional background doesn't make it any less valid. In fact, I'd argue that his hands-on experience gives him insights that a classroom can't teach." The room fell silent. Michael sat frozen, stunned by Susan's unwavering defense of him. After the meeting, Susan caught up with Michael in the hallway. "See," she said with a small smile, "you're not the only one with something to prove." Michael chuckled, though his voice was thick with emotion. "Thank you, Susan, for standing up for me." She shrugged. "It's easy to stand up for someone you believe in. Just keep doing what you're doing, and they'll come around." That night, as Michael sat at his kitchen table reviewing documents, Emily appeared beside him holding a plate of cookies she had carefully arranged. "These are for you," she said proudly. "Because you're working so hard." Michael laughed, pulling her into a hug. "Thanks, kiddo, I needed that." As Emily skipped back to her room, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. He didn't just owe it to Susan to prove himself, he owed it to Emily, the person who believed in him the most. The air in the Orion Motors conference room was thick with tension. On the large screen at the front of the room, graphs and numbers projected an unsettling reality. A critical flaw had been discovered in the company's newest line of vehicles, just days before their launch. The discovery posed a significant risk to both Orion's reputation and its bottom line, and the room buzzed with low murmurs of concern. Michael sat quietly at the far end of the table, observing the flurry of discussions. His confidence had grown over the past few weeks, but this was uncharted territory. Around him, the senior engineers debated potential fixes, their voices growing louder as time passed. "This is a disaster," Tom said, throwing up his hands. "We've run every test, and the problem persists. We're out of time." Susan, seated at the head of the table, remained composed. "We're not out of time," she said firmly. "We have 2 days before the launch. Let's focus on solutions." Tom scoffed. "With all due respect, Susan, we need weeks, not days. At this point, the best option might be to postpone the launch entirely." The murmurs around the room grew louder. Postponing the launch would cost millions and damage the company's reputation, but an unresolved issue could be even worse. Michael cleared his throat, drawing the room's attention. "I think I know what's causing the problem," he said, his voice steady but quiet. All eyes turned to him. Tom raised an eyebrow. "You think?" Michael ignored the jab and leaned forward. "I've been reviewing the test data, and I think the issue lies in the calibration of the suspension system. It's not a design flaw. It's a matter of fine-tuning. I believe we can fix it without delaying the launch." The room fell silent for a moment before Tom spoke. "That's a bold assumption. And how exactly do you propose we fix it in 2 days?" Michael took a deep breath. "We'd need to recalibrate the system using a different testing method. It's unconventional and a bit risky, but it could save the timeline." Tom leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. "Risky? That's an understatement. If you're wrong, we'll be worse off than we are now." Susan, who had been listening intently, finally spoke. "What makes you confident this will work, Michael?" Michael met her gaze. "I've worked with similar systems before, just on a smaller scale. The principles are the same, and I've seen this method work in other contexts. It's not traditional, but it's effective." The room erupted into debate. Some were cautiously optimistic, while others, like Tom, were adamantly against taking such a risk. Michael remained calm, answering questions and addressing concerns as best he could. "Enough," Susan said, her voice cutting through the noise. She turned to Michael. "Can you guarantee this solution will work?" Michael hesitated for a fraction of a second before replying, "No, but I believe it's the best option we have." Susan nodded, her expression unreadable. Then she addressed the room. "We don't have weeks to spare, and postponing the launch isn't an option. Michael's plan may be risky, but it's a calculated risk, and it's one I'm willing to take." Tom opened his mouth to protest, but Susan cut him off. "The decision is final. Let's get to work." For the next 48 hours, Michael and the engineering team worked around the clock. The office transformed into a hive of activity, with teams running tests, analyzing data, and recalibrating systems under Michael's guidance. Despite the grueling pace, Michael felt a renewed sense of purpose. Susan checked in frequently, her presence a steadying force. "How's it going?" she asked late on the second night, bringing him a cup of coffee. "We're close," Michael said, his eyes scanning a spreadsheet on his screen. "If these numbers hold, we'll be ready by morning." She smiled. "I knew you'd figure it out." Michael looked up at her, his exhaustion momentarily forgotten. "Thanks for believing in me, Susan. It means a lot." She shrugged lightly, but her expression was sincere. "You've earned it, Michael. Now let's finish this." By dawn, the tests were complete. The recalibrated suspension system performed flawlessly, and the team erupted into cheers. Michael allowed himself a small smile, though he couldn't shake the lingering nervousness of presenting the results to the board. Later that morning, Susan and Michael stood before the board of directors to present their findings. Michael outlined the problem, the solution, and the successful test results with calm precision. When he finished, the room was silent for a moment before Margaret, the stern-faced board member who had previously doubted him, spoke. "Well done, Mr. Turner," she said, nodding approvingly. "This was a risky move, but it paid off. You've earned my respect." Michael felt a weight lift from his shoulders as the other board members murmured their agreement. That evening, Susan invited Michael and Emily to a small celebratory dinner at her home. Emily was thrilled, chattering excitedly about her day at school as Susan and Michael shared a quiet toast. "To taking risks," Susan said, raising her glass. And to the people who believe in us, Michael added, clinking his glass against hers. Emily, holding up her soda, chimed in, and to being awesome. The three of them laughed, the warmth of the moment erasing the exhaustion of the past 2 days. As Michael drove home that night, Emily fast asleep in the back seat, he reflected on how far he had come. The mechanic, who had once doubted his place in this world, was now part of something bigger. And while he still didn't know what the future held, he felt ready to face it, with Susan and Emily by his side. The evening air was crisp and quiet as Michael pulled his car into Susan's driveway. Emily sat in the back seat, excitedly chattering about the dinner they had just shared with Susan at her home. It had been a small but warm celebration of their recent success with the project, filled with laughter and stories. For Michael, the night had been a rare escape from the weight of responsibility. "Dad," Emily said, peeking her head between the front seats, "can we come here again? Miss Susan's house is so pretty, and I like how she laughs at my jokes." Michael chuckled. "We'll see, kiddo. Let's not wear out our welcome." As they stepped out of the car, Susan appeared at the doorway, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of the porch light. She smiled and waved, calling out, "Michael, do you have a moment?" Michael glanced at Emily, who was already climbing back into the car to retrieve her coloring book. "Sure," he said, walking towards Susan. The two of them settled on the porch, a blanket of stars stretching across the night sky above. Susan handed Michael a steaming mug of tea. "Emily's quite the firecracker," Susan said, her tone warm. "She reminds me of what it's like to be carefree." Michael smiled, cradling the mug in his hands. "She keeps me grounded. Everything I do is for her." Susan nodded, her expression softening. "You're a good father, Michael. It's not easy doing it all on your own." He hesitated, the words catching in his throat before he finally spoke. "It's not easy, no, but it's worth it. Losing her mom was the hardest thing I've ever been through. And Emily, she was so young, too young to understand. I had to figure out how to be both parents for her." Susan looked at him, her eyes filled with quiet empathy. "How did you do it? Stay strong through all of that?" Michael let out a small, humorless laugh. "You just do. Because there's no other choice. Emily needed me, and I couldn't let her down. But I won't lie, there were times I felt like I was failing her, like I wasn't giving her the life she deserved." Susan reached out, placing a hand on his arm. "Michael, from what I've seen, you've given Emily more than most kids could ever hope for. Love, stability, a father who's always there for her, that's priceless." Michael glanced down at her hand, then back at her. "Thanks, Susan. That means a lot." For a moment, silence hung between them, broken only by the faint rustling of the wind. Then Susan spoke again, her voice softer. "My childhood was different," she began. "I had everything money could buy. Big house, private schools, vacations to exotic places. But my parents, they were always working. I'd see them at dinner sometimes, but even then they'd be talking about business." She paused, her gaze distant. "I used to sit at the top of the stairs and listen to the nannies whisper about how lucky I was. What a privileged life, they'd say. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt invisible." Michael watched her, his heart tightening at the vulnerability in her voice. "Susan continued, that's probably why I buried myself in work when I got older. It was familiar, safe. I thought if I worked hard enough I could build something that mattered, something that would make up for what I missed." She turned to Michael, her expression bittersweet. "But sometimes, I wonder if I've just been running in circles, chasing something I can't name." Michael shook his head. "From where I'm sitting, you've built something incredible, and the fact that you're here, spending time with Emily and me, says a lot about the kind of person you are." Susan smiled, though her eyes glistened slightly. "You're kind, Michael. Maybe kinder than I deserve." The conversation was interrupted by Emily, who burst out of the car holding her coloring book. "Miss Susan, look, I made this for you." Susan knelt to Emily's level, accepting the page with a wide grin. It was a simple drawing of 3 stick figures, one labelled me, another labelled Dad, and the third labelled Susan. "I drew us," Emily announced proudly. Susan's throat tightened as she looked at the drawing. "Thank you, Emily, this is beautiful. I'll hang it on my fridge." "Really?" Emily asked, her eyes lighting up. "Absolutely," Susan replied. Emily threw her arms around Susan in an unprompted hug. "You're the best, Miss Susan." Michael stood off to the side, his chest swelling with a mix of pride and something he couldn't quite name. As the evening wound down, Michael and Susan exchanged a lingering glance. There was an unspoken understanding between them, a recognition of shared struggles and a growing bond that neither was ready to fully acknowledge. "Thanks for tonight," Michael said, his voice low. "Any time," Susan replied. "And, Michael, don't forget that you're doing an amazing job. Emily's lucky to have you." Michael nodded, a small smile tugging at his lips. "Good night, Susan." "Good night, Michael." On the drive home, Emily's chatter filled the car, but Michael's thoughts lingered on Susan's words and the quiet connection they had shared. He didn't know what it all meant, but for the first time in a long time, he felt a flicker of something he hadn't allowed himself to feel in years. Hope. The workshop hummed with quiet efficiency as Michael moved between workstations, his hands deftly sorting through tools and materials. The success of the recent project had brought him a newfound respect among his colleagues, and for the first time since joining Orion Motors, he felt like he truly belonged. Yet a nagging thought lingered in the back of his mind. He loved solving problems and the satisfaction of seeing a machine roar to life under his care. But the corporate environment, with its endless meetings and polished presentations, wasn't where his heart lay. One afternoon, Susan invited him to her office. As always, her demeanor was professional but warm. "You've done an incredible job, Michael," she began, gesturing for him to sit, "not just with the project, but with the way you've handled yourself here. The board has noticed and they're impressed." Michael smiled, a mix of gratitude and discomfort. "Thank you, that means a lot." Susan leaned forward slightly, "which is why I wanted to talk to you about the future. I'd like to offer you a position on the leadership team." Michael blinked, the weight of her words settling over him. "Leadership? You mean upper management?" Susan nodded. "You've proven you have the skills and the perspective we need. This would be a step up, not just in responsibility, but in influence. You'd have the chance to shape the company in meaningful ways." For a moment, Michael was silent, staring at the polished wood of her desk. The offer was tempting, a testament to how far he'd come. But something inside him resisted. "Susan," he said finally, his voice steady but hesitant, "I'm honored, really. But I don't think that's the right path for me." Susan's brow furrowed slightly. "Why not? You've earned this, Michael." He nodded. "I know, and I'm grateful. But when I picture my future, I don't see myself in an office or leading meetings. I see myself working with my hands, running a shop of my own." Susan leaned back in her chair, her expression thoughtful. "Your own garage," she said slowly, as if weighing the idea. "Yeah," Michael said, his voice firmer now. "It's something I've dreamed about for years. A place where I can do what I love, but also help others, maybe train younger mechanics who don't have the same opportunities I've had." Susan's lips curved into a small smile. "That sounds like a vision worth pursuing." Michael looked at her, surprised. "You think so?" "I do," she said, "and I'd like to help." The days that followed were a whirlwind of planning and preparation. With Susan's financial support and business expertise, Michael began laying the groundwork. For his new garage, he worked tirelessly, sketching out designs, sourcing equipment, and finding the perfect location. Susan, true to her word, was there every step of the way. She helped him navigate the legal and logistical hurdles, her experience and connections proving invaluable. One evening, as they reviewed the final blueprints, Susan said, "You know, Michael, this isn't just a garage. It's a place where people will find opportunities, hope. That's something special." Michael smiled, the weight of her words sinking in. "It's more than I ever imagined it could be," he admitted. Finally, the day of the grand opening arrived. The garage stood gleaming in the morning light, its sign proudly displaying the name Turner's Garage, built on trust. The space was everything Michael had dreamed of. Spacious, modern, yet welcoming, with areas dedicated to both repairs and training. The event drew a small crowd of friends, family, and community members. Emily darted around excitedly, showing off the new space to anyone who would listen. Susan arrived shortly before the ribbon-cutting ceremony, her presence commanding attention, yet understated, as always. She approached Michael, handing him a small box. "What's this?" he asked. "Open it," she said, her eyes twinkling. Inside was a sleek engraved plaque that read, "For Michael Turner, a man who fixes more than just cars." Michael felt a lump rise in his throat as he looked at her. "Thank you, Susan, for everything." She smiled. "You earned it, Michael. I just helped you see what was already there." As the ribbon was cut and the garage officially opened, Michael stood beside Susan, watching the activity around him. Customers inspected the space. Young mechanics mingled with seasoned professionals, and Emily proudly handed out flyers she had made herself. "This is just the beginning," Susan said quietly, her voice filled with conviction. "I believe you're capable of so much more." Michael turned to her, his expression one of gratitude and determination. "And I wouldn't be here without you." They stood there for a moment, side by side, as the world they had built together came to life. The faint hum of an engine filled the air as Michael turned a wrench, his hands steady and precise. Beside him, Emily perched on a stool, her small fingers smeared with grease as she carefully aligned bolts for a vintage car restoration project. The garage, now buzzing with activity, had become a beacon in the community, a place where cars were fixed, dreams were rekindled, and futures were built. The sign outside, Turner's Garage, built on trust, glinted in the late afternoon sun. Inside, the warm smell of coffee mixed with the tang of engine oil, a blend that felt like home to Michael. "You're doing great, kiddo," Michael said, glancing at Emily, who beamed up at him. "Really?" she asked, holding up a perfectly aligned bolt. "Absolutely," he said with a grin. "At this rate, I might have to start paying you." Emily giggled. "Can I get paid in ice cream?" "Deal," Michael replied, laughing. The familiar sound of heels clicking on the concrete floor caught his attention. Turning toward the entrance, he saw Susan standing there, a small smile on her lips as she took in the scene. "Hope I'm not interrupting," she said, stepping inside. "Not at all," Michael replied, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're always welcome here." Emily jumped off her stool, running toward Susan with excitement. "Miss Susan, you came!" Susan knelt to Emily's level, accepting the enthusiastic hug. "Of course I did. What are you two working on today?" "A super old car," Emily exclaimed, pointing toward the vintage vehicle. "Dad says it's a classic, but it's really dirty and broken." Susan laughed softly. "Sometimes the best things just need a little extra care." Michael gestured toward the workbench. "Want to join us? There's always room for one more." Susan hesitated briefly before rolling up her sleeves. "Why not? I'll give it a shot." For the next hour, the three of them worked side by side. Michael guided Susan through the basics, and Emily happily chimed in with her own tips, making the process more fun than functional. "You're a natural," Michael teased, as Susan managed to tighten a bolt correctly on her third try. "Don't lie to me," Susan replied with a laugh, brushing a stray strand of hair from her face. Michael chuckled. "All right, you're not bad for a CEO." As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, Michael suggested a break. "Emily," he said, nudging her gently, "why don't you grab us some sodas from the fridge?" "Okay," she said, darting toward the small kitchenette in the corner of the garage. With Emily out of earshot, Susan leaned against the workbench, her gaze thoughtful. "You've built something incredible here, Michael. It's not just a garage. It's a second chance for so many people." Michael leaned beside her, his expression soft. "It wouldn't have happened without you. You gave me the chance to see what I was capable of." Susan shook her head. "I might have opened the door, but you walked through it. You deserve this." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment before Susan asked, "Do you believe in chance encounters?" Michael looked at her, the question lingering in the air. "I didn't," he admitted. "But meeting you, it changed everything. It's hard not to believe in something bigger when I think about how our paths crossed." Susan smiled, her eyes glinting in the dim light. "Funny, I was just thinking the same thing." Emily returned, balancing 3 sodas in her arms. "Here you go," she said, handing them out with pride. Michael took his with a smile. "Thanks, kiddo. You're the best assistant ever." Emily sat cross-legged on the floor, sipping her drink. After a moment, she looked up at Susan. "Miss Susan, are you staying for dinner?" Susan glanced at Michael, surprised. "Oh, I wouldn't want to intrude." "You wouldn't," Emily interrupted. "We're having spaghetti. Dad makes the best spaghetti ever." Michael laughed, shaking his head. "She's not wrong. My spaghetti's pretty good." Susan hesitated, her gaze flickering between Michael and Emily. Then she smiled. "All right, you've convinced me. I'll stay." The 3 of them ended the evening around Michael's small kitchen table, the meal simple but filled with laughter and warmth. Emily animatedly recounted her favorite moments from the day, her joy infectious. As they cleared the table, Susan paused, watching Michael and Emily interact. There was a lightness in the air, a sense of belonging that she hadn't felt in years. Before leaving, Susan crouched down to Emily's level. "Thank you for letting me stay tonight. I had a wonderful time." Emily hugged her tightly. "You should come back soon." Susan glanced at Michael, her smile soft. "We'll see." As Susan's car disappeared down the road, Michael stood on the porch, Emily leaning against his side. "Dad," Emily said, looking up at him, "do you think Miss Susan is part of our family?" Michael paused, considering her words. "I think she's someone very special to us," he said finally. Emily nodded, satisfied with the answer. That night, as Michael tucked Emily into bed, he reflected on how far they had come. The struggles, the uncertainties, the unexpected opportunities. It all led to this moment, a life filled with hope and connection. And while he didn't know what the future held, he knew one thing for certain. They were no longer walking through life alone. And that's the end of Michael and Susan's incredible journey. A story of kindness, resilience, and the unexpected ways our lives can change when we least expect it. But now, we'd love to hear from you. Where are you watching this video from? What part of Michael and Susan's story resonated most with you? Have you ever had a moment in your life where a simple act of kindness led to something extraordinary? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We'd love to read your stories and connect with you. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more heartwarming stories just like this. And don't miss out. Hit that notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we release new content. Your support means the world to us, and it allows us to continue creating meaningful stories that inspire and uplift. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next video. Until then, take care and remember, the smallest acts of kindness can lead to the most extraordinary outcomes. See you soon.